The case of Suzanne Capper is one of the most disturbing and brutal crimes in British history. Her abduction, week-long torture and murder in December 1992 shocked the nation due to the sheer cruelty inflicted upon her by those she trusted. But who was Suzanne Capper? Now in today's video we're not going to visit the locations where this horrific crime on Suzanne Capper took place. We do have reasons behind that, but we don't really want to disclose it in this video. Instead, we're here at Blackley Cemetery, just on the outskirts of Manchester, or the city centre I should say of Manchester. We're going to visit Suzanne's final resting place, her grave, which is just behind us in that direction. And we're going to talk about probably one of the most heinous and sadistic acts of murder that we have yet covered on the Days of Horror YouTube channel. Suzanne Capper was a 16-year-old girl from Moston, Manchester, who had a difficult upbringing. She came from a broken home, and though she was still close to her mother, she often stayed with friends or acquaintances rather than living in one stable environment. And despite her hardships, Susan was known as a kind, quiet girl who wanted to be loved and accepted. One of the people she frequently stayed with was Jean Powell, who was 26 years old, a woman who lived in a house in Longworthy Road in Moston. Powell was a mother of three and had a reputation for dealing drugs and hosting violent, dangerous people in her home. Among them was Bernadette McNeely, 24 years old, Powell's best friend, who was also involved in drugs and crime. These two women, along with several others, would go on to become Suzanne's torturers and murderers. So what was the reason behind the kidnapping, torture and ultimate death of Suzanne Capper? Well, it appears that Suzanne, she was accused of stealing a pink coat from one of the 6 members. This was a fabricated lie. There was no truth in any of this. But more alarmingly, more disturbingly, one of the torturers accused Suzanne of bringing pubic lice into the household. Again, this was a fabricated story. Pubic lice had already been introduced into the household by one of the members themselves, one of the torturers. But it seems to be that all 6 of her torturers, of her murderers, they would accuse Suzanne of sleeping around and bringing pubic lice into their household. Now, it's these reasons, it was because of this that they would decide to kidnap and inflict as much pain and punishment on Suzanne. Again, it would all later emerge that it was all fabricated. It's hard to explain why they would use reasoning such as that to kidnap and torture a young, innocent young girl. The people involved in Suzanne's murder, well, this was a group of 6 people. You had Jean Powell, 26, the ringleader, and she allowed her house to be the site of Suzanne's torture. Bernadette McNeely, 24, equally cruel, she actively participated in the torture. Glyn Powell, 29, Jean's estranged husband who joined in the abuse. Anthony Dudson, 17, Jean Powell's boyfriend who also took part. Jeffrey Lee, 26, a friend of the group who was also involved. And then finally we had Clifford Pook, 18, Bernadette McNeely's brother, who joined in also with this torture. Each of them played a role in Suzanne's suffering. It was in early December 1992 when the group lured Suzanne to Jean Powell's home, but this was only the beginning of a 6-day nightmare. She was shortly moved to McNeely's house at number 97 Langworthy Road, where her captors chained her to a bed. And it was here where they would keep her in an upstairs room, repeatedly beating her, burning her and inflicting horrific injuries. Now, what they did to Suzanne Capper isn't for the faint-hearted, and it probably is one of the worst stories in terms of torture followed by murder that we've ever covered here on the Days of Horror YouTube channel. So for those maybe with a faint heart who don't really like the gory details, you may have to fast forward a minute or two and then carry on with this story. But we are going to talk a little now a bit about what pain was inflicted on Suzanne Capper. But like I said, it isn't for the faint-hearted. The torture Suzanne endured was beyond comprehension, and some of the horrifying acts, well, like I said, these include repeated beatings. She was punched, kicked and beaten with planks of wood and other objects. She was injected with drugs, and it was this that it was believed would be enough to keep her awake while it prolonged her suffering. She was burnt with cigarettes, and all of the 6 capturers or torturers, they would keep stubbing out cigarettes all over Suzanne's body. If that isn't disturbing enough, Suzanne Capper was also forced to listen to a quote, a phrase, out of the movie Child's Play 3. And that phrase was simply, "Hi, I'm Chucky," and this was turned into a song, and it was played on loop at the loudest possible volume over and over again.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
She was also doused in boiling water. Mike Neely and the others threw boiling water over Suzanne repeatedly, scalding her skin. One of the members would also begin to pull Suzanne's teeth out with pliers. As for Suzanne and the relentless torturing, the punishment she was receiving, she was also made to sleep in her own faeces and urine. She was rarely allowed to use the toilet, which basically kept her sleeping in her own filth. It was on December the 14th, and around a week after her kidnap ordeal, in which she had faced humiliation and torture at the hands of her kidnappers, she was bundled into a car and driven several miles away to a place known as Romley. And it was in some forest land or some forestry there where they stripped her naked. They began dousing Suzanne in petrol, and then they set her on fire. They set Suzanne alight. They fled the scene expecting Suzanne to die there. But for them, for the people involved, they were badly mistaken. Suzanne, despite a week of harrowing torture, she still had the strength, and despite suffering 80% burns to her body, she still had the strength to make her way to a road. And she began walking, albeit gingerly, obviously because of the pain she was under. She began walking up this road, looking for help, looking for assistance. Now, it was a man by the name of Barry Sutcliffe. He was on his way to work with a couple of other work colleagues when they came across Suzanne walking up that road. They took her into a nearby house where help was sought, and then obviously an ambulance and the police were called. When Barry and his acquaintances got out of the vehicle they were driving, they ran to the aid of Suzanne, and she barely had enough strength to whisper, "Help me." After obviously the ambulance had arrived, Suzanne, she was taken to Wythenshawe Hospital, and it was there that she was put immediately into intensive care. She was so badly burned that doctors had to bathe her in saline. They also removed the dead skin that was still clinging to her body. But despite their best efforts, Suzanne succumbed to her injuries 4 days later on December the 18th, 1992. But before she died, she named her attackers to police officers, and this would ensure justice would be served. Now, as you can see, Suzanne's grave, the family grave itself, is being looked after. It's immaculate. You've got these angels at either side, and as Vicky spotted as soon as we got here, you've also got this nice little marble designed book. Always loved and sadly missed someone special. Suzanne, memories are all I have now, which makes me very sad. But I am grateful. I am ever grateful for the wonderful times we had. Love, Mum.
Suzanne.
And then you have this. Suzanne, daughter, you are thought about always, loved so much. There will never be anyone more special than you. And the headstone. Obviously you've got the family names. Pray for the souls of William Dunbar, a beloved husband, father and grandfather. Died December 12th, 1974, aged 59. His dear granddaughter, Suzanne Jones Capper, a beloved daughter and sister. Died December 18th, 1992, aged 16 years. And it obviously goes on with Doris Dunbar, wife of William, and Gary O'Connor, loving son, brother, dad and granddad. So a family grave, but this is the final resting place of Suzanne Capper. The 6 attackers were duly arrested, and their trial at the Manchester Crown Court revealed the full horror of Suzanne's ordeal. The judge, Mr. Justice Sykes, described the crime as one of sadistic pleasure. The court case itself was full of tension, full of anger and horror in the public gallery. This made international news worldwide, and it horrified not just the nation but the world. But eventually Bernadette McNeely, Jean Powell and Glyn Powell, they would be sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. Anthony Dodson received a life sentence but was later granted parole. Clifford Pook and Jeffrey Lee were convicted of lesser charges and served shorter sentences. McNeely and Powell were later released after serving their minimum terms, a decision that would spark outrage. Now, interestingly, there was one witness, and he came forward during the court case. His name was David Hill, and he was 18 years old. And he would testify to seeing Suzanne Capper being chained to this bed, and it was clearly obvious to him that she had been tortured. Now, he had been told by Dodson to sit and wait in the house. We don't know why he had to sit and wait. We don't know where Dodson and the others had gone, but David Hill himself was told to sit and watch. Now, Suzanne Capper, she must have heard what was going on, and she asked who was in the house, and David himself, he went to speak to Suzanne, and Suzanne begged to be released. Now, David was fearful for what could happen to him if he did that, and he told the jury that he was frightened for his own well-being, and he thought that obviously the rest of the torturers themselves would have come for him next if he had helped Suzanne Capper. But it does go to show that if he had made an anonymous phone call, if he'd have done something to help Suzanne, she may well have escaped with her life. This case truly shocked, like I said, a nation, if not the world, for several reasons. One being the fact that Suzanne knew her captors, her abductors, her torturers and ultimately her murderers. They acted in a sadistic pleasure. In fact, they wanted to keep Suzanne alive for as long as possible. They drugged her, during the torture, during the ordeal, to keep her awake so she could feel as much pain as she possibly could. They then took her to some woods over in Romley where they stripped her naked and then set fire to her. They used a movie, Child's Play 3, and a soundbite out of that movie. And it wasn't the movie itself, one could argue, but it was a song that they'd used. And they played it to Suzanne on repeat at full volume over and over. If I remember correctly, researching this story, I think it was headphones that they put over Suzanne. Obviously, so the neighbours themselves weren't annoyed or alerted to what possibly could have been going on next door. But certainly, "Hi, I'm Chucky," over and over and over again at full volume with this dance music playing. Again, that is torture in itself. It was such a sadistic crime, and like I said, it's one that myself and Vicky, we've wanted to cover for quite a while. But for reasons, like I said, what we'll keep to ourselves, we're not visiting the location where this took place, and we're not going to visit the location where Suzanne was set alight. We do know where that took place, we've pinpointed the spot, but I think for this one, like I said, for reasons, we're just not going to visit those locations. So before we leave Blacklist Cemetery, we were just going to touch upon the story of Suzanne Capper just a little bit more. I think Vicky had quite a bit to say on this because she always wanted to be on this video, not necessarily as I was talking, but the roundup at the end. So what are your thoughts on this? It's probably the most brutal one in terms of what victims had to endure. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously that first lady befriended her.
Yeah.
Then obviously the false accusations on her.
The pink coats, the pubic lice.
And then it's 6 against 1. You know, where's the fairness in that for a start? I've never come across a case yet where it's been 6 against 1.
No.
What they did to her, drugging her so that they could torment her even further. All 6 of those people were responsible for her death. They should have all got life, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And the horror, her mother, I know the family was a little bit broken up from what we gather, broken family. But obviously she was still their little angel. And for them as parents to hear what was done to their daughter.
What she had to go through.
Yeah.
At what was seemingly friends.
Yeah.
People she thought she trusted.
Yeah. And they did that to her.
And going back to the actual evening when she was set on fire, it wasn't all 6 who went with them to the woods. There was a couple of them, and it was one in particular that he actually lit.
Yeah.
Well, he sparked, didn't he? You know, trying to find the right words for that one because it's so sick, it's graphic. I mean,
but to actually pin her, cuff her to that bed.
Yeah.
She's in her own feces, in her own pedal.
Yeah.
She's got these ear. Oh, can you imagine? And she's had her teeth ripped out.
Yeah.
She can't fight back.
Beaten, battered, teeth pulled.
I don't know if she was abused.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's be honest.
We have read a few articles where it does get a little more, well, quite graphic. But we're not sure how true some of these versions are. So we purposely left any talk of sexual abuse out of our story, our version of it, because we're not sure. But
let's be honest, they were sick of the sadists.
Sadists, yeah. Sadists.
I don't know. I feel for that girl.
Yeah.
And we've seen that picture of her in a bridesmaid's gown.
Yeah.
So not being funny. That's the right word.
Life ahead of her.
Yeah, and to be well, like I say, this woman took her in. She thought she was a friend, and this happened to her.
Yeah. I mean, people always said, there's always 2 sides to a story, but stories such as this.
6 against 1.
Yeah, there's no 2 sides to a story. No. Like you said, you touched upon it, she came from somewhat of a bit of a broken family, but she was still well loved. Yeah. By all accounts, she didn't really, from what I gather, cause anybody any problems. She wasn't a troublemaker. No. If she was, it was more of a teen thing, like we all do. We all get into trouble, don't we, for silly little things. But But to be accused of stealing a pink coat and then to tell the public that she passed on pubic lice and this is why we did what we did, I mean, that's no excuse. There are no excuses to commit such acts of horror on somebody else, inflict that much pain, and then go to kill her. I mean, no, there's no excuse. There's no excusing it whatsoever.
But if you were, well, we've got children. If you are that child's mum and dad and you hear what they did to her,
yeah, you'd want revenge.
You would. Too
You
right.
would be
and the
waiting.
fact that they're out of prison now.
Yeah, I personally, and I'd be like another story we've recently covered, and that is obviously the Moyes murders and how David Smith stopped it. But we have watched a video since then of Anne West, the mother of Leslie Ann Downey, and she's on Prime TV telling the world that if Hindley was ever released, Anne West would do time for her murder. I think we'd be the same if that happened to any of ours in a case such as what we've covered with Suzanne Capper. I think if that had been our children, fingers crossed, nothing ever untoward happens, but I think we would be like Anne West in that we would probably do time. We would be waiting for those 6 to come out of prison, and one by one, somehow we would get to them. 100%, wouldn't we? 100%.
But also, when they come out of prison, I'm not being funny, do they come out and they've got different identities?
I don't know with this story.
Walk the street?
Yeah, with this story, I don't know. We know in cases of child murderers, like the Bulgar killings, they've come out with new identities. But because these were grown adults, I'm not entirely sure how that works. Perhaps people who are watching this can leave a comment and maybe educate us on that, because I don't really know.
Because I don't think it'd just be the parents who'd want them dead.
The public, maybe. Yeah, the public would want,
be an outcry.
Retribution. But yeah, it's a horrific case, and like I said, I've mentioned it twice, and for the third time, for reasons obviously me and Vicky know about, we're not going to visit, or we haven't visited the locations with this one. We do pride ourselves normally in these videos where we do visit the locations, but just every now and again, a story such as this does crop up where we could quite easily go to the house where this all unravelled. We know exactly where Suzanne was set alight. But with this one, more than any, it's just one we felt we didn't want to do that. We hope you understand why.
We'll put pictures over.
Yeah,
show you.
Yeah, you will have seen
video.
Yeah, you will have seen videos on maybe photos, or I should say maybe videos, but you will certainly have seen photos of the crime scene. And
we are in Manchester now, so it's not as if we can't get there. We've got our reasons.
Yeah. So, like I say, we do hope you've enjoyed this video. It's barbaric, it's morbid, it's so sickening. But if you did enjoy it, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up, don't forget to comment down below, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. We do bring out a video, well, pretty much each and every Monday evening, 7:05 UK time. But yeah, I think we'll leave it here, this one. And we'll see you all.
This is on the same lines as Brady's, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's horrific. This is horrific. But yeah, we will see you all soon in the next one, guys. So take care and look after yourselves.